Well, hello, Chi Alpha Leader. My name is Kingsley DeMacpour. I serve on staff here at the Heights with the students. And first, let me say we are so grateful and thankful to you for giving us your weekend to serve students. And this is huge. This is you're a blessing for us. And we are praying for you as the weekend approaches, and we will continue praying for you during the weekend. But we know that you guys are what makes the weekend. You are like the offensive line on the football team. You are down in the trenches. You're with the students. You are kind of like thermostats. You're setting the temperature for each group, and we are so grateful for each of you and wanting to be a part of this. And I want to just give a brief overview of how the lessons are going to be for the weekend. And so session 1, which is rising up in worship, and I'm going to be sharing about that in here just a little bit. Session 1, rising up in worship, is Friday night. And session 2, Race to Life, that's going to be Saturday morning. You're going to be leading that in your host homes. And session 3, which is Raise a Banner of the Gospel, that's going to be Saturday night. Also, you're going to be leading that from your host homes. So Cody is going to share in the lesson for session 3, but in the student book, their lesson or small group number 4 is your session number 3, which is Raise the Gospel. So just so that doesn't cause confusion, the students small group number 4 is your session 3, which is Raise the Banner of the Gospel. Like I said, Cody is going to explain that in the 3rd session video. So for this lesson, Rising Up in Worship, each lesson has 3 parts. First part is the getting started, and then it goes to digging in, and then wrapping up. This is basically an intro, and then the body, the meat of the lesson, and then kind of a conclusion or application. If you think more in those terms than getting started, digging in, wrapping up, you can think in intro, body, and application. So for this first lesson, the whole uprising curriculum, the goal is that the students will realize that the gospel has a response. We don't as believers or as Christians just believe with our minds that God has sent his son into the earth and that happened 2,000 years ago, and that's it, period. We don't believe that. We believe that the gospel changes lives. It changes our hearts. It transforms us. Something marvelous, something radical happens in our lives, and it changes our minds, it changes our hearts, it changes our desires. So the goal of this whole weekend is that the students will realize what God has done for them, and that they will respond. And that response, we hope that they would rise up. They would rise up to the challenge of living that transformed life, living that new life, and then going and taking that gospel to their schools and to their communities and to the ends of the earth. So that is the goal of this weekend, that the students will rise up to the challenge of the gospel and what God has done for us and what God is doing through us. So this first lesson is about rising up in worship. And the passage that we're going to be looking at that you're going to be looking at with your students is Psalm 95 and Hebrews chapter 12. And you'll mostly spend your time in Psalm 95 because it's just a little bit longer. Hebrews is just one verse. I hope that you've already looked through the lesson, you've already looked through the leader prep. If you're on chialphaleader.com, you notice that there is a leader prep, and then there's the video, and then there is the lesson. So we've hoped that you've downloaded both the leader prep and then the lesson. The leader prep is just a way for you to build a context, or for a way for you to build context for the Bible passages that we're going to be studying. Why is this important? It helps you kind of set the stage for what you're going to be studying. So the leader prep for this first lesson gives you a little bit background about on Psalm 95. It tells you who wrote the book, it tells you when it was written, and it tells you the purpose for its writing. And again, this is important because we want to build a context. We want to build context for the students as they're reading the Bible, so that they can chronologically understand what's going on and what's going on in the passage. Psalm 95, we don't know exactly who writes it. It could be, it's probably is David, because it's quoted in Hebrews as a Davidic psalm, as a psalm that David writes. So I know the lesson says that we don't know who writes it, but you can say that it's not associated with a person in the psalm, but we know that later on in the New Testament writers associate it with David. So the main point of this lesson is that the psalmist encounters God, and upon encountering God, that has a response to him. He praises God for God revealing himself. And I just want to read just a few verses here, Psalm 95, verse 3-5. It says that, "For the Lord is a great God, a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are his also. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker." So in response to seeing God as the creator God who created the stars in the sky, who created the seas, the psalmist says, "Come, let us bow down. Let's worship him. Let's kneel before him, because he is worthy of our praise." So the lesson begins with a getting started portion. And again, that's just like an icebreakers session. And Friday night, I know each group may kind of vary in the energy level. If you're in a group of 7th graders, I'd imagine that they may have a hard time kind of gelling together, or because they probably don't know everyone in the group, or you may find yourself in a group that's very talkative. But the point, if you're in a group that's very talkative, or if you're in a group that is very quiet, is that you want to harness that energy. For the group that is very talkative, you want to harness that energy towards the lesson. And the group that's very shy, you want to, again, be the thermostat. You want to set the temperature for them. And maybe you want to start with a personal story of something that God did for you that brought a response of worship in your life, just to get it started. But whichever way that you feel led to make that first session a little bit more lively is up to you. But the takeaway is that we want these students to recognize that we see God do marvelous things each and every day. That isn't the main challenge. We see God moving in so many different ways. Just seeing the creation and seeing the sun rise up, or seeing the sun set down at night, is enough reason to praise God. Is enough reason to worship God. We go to sport games, and we are on sports teams. Students are on sports teams. We watch the the conference championships for football. We watch the Super Bowl and see touchdowns being scored and see great plays being made, and it arises a response out of us. And in the same way, or even in a much greater way, seeing God move and do mighty things in our lives and around us should cause a response, should cause a response of worship and of reverence and of thankfulness and gratefulness to God. That is the takeaway for the weekend. So you want to start that getting started a portion in your students are going to be on page 8 and talking about just different things in their life that has caused a response. So that's how that lesson is going to start. And then after that, you will move into the Psalm 95 portion where it says that you're going to go through the psalm, and the first question you're going to ask them is, how would you define worship? And some of them are going to say worship is singing on Sunday mornings, and your response is going to be good. That is one form of worship. And you might say something like, singing is one form of worship. Giving God our treasures or offering our tithes is a form of worship. Just thanking God and seeing a beautiful sunset or seeing the stars in the skies at night is a form of worship. So the point of this is just to help them to think a little bit more in depth than what they are usually associating worship with. So you want to ask them, how do they encounter God on their own? And you may have to help them to dig a little bit deeper because, again, they are they've grown up their whole life, or some of them might not have any background in the church or might not know exactly what worship is. It might be a new concept to them, but you are just trying to drive home the idea that worship is when we see God move around us or in us in a marvelous way in response in the right way. Worship is when we see God move in a marvelous way and respond in the right way. So we don't worship God necessarily because of what he has given us. We worship him because of who he is. And the things that he has done reflect his very character. So that is the Psalm 95 portion. And then after that, you will go into the Hebrews 12:28. And that says, Hebrews chapter 12, verse 28, it says that, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. And thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. Again, that is just on the same idea of we have received something marvelous from God. We have received an unshaken kingdom. Now that we have received an unshaken kingdom, let us worship God with reverence and awe. Let us worship him with, like the psalmist says, with kneeling down and raising our hands and opening our mouths and singing to him for all that he has done for us. For our God is a consuming fire. And on this verse, just a quick little note, when it says that we received a kingdom that cannot be shaken, this Hebrews was written in the early centuries. And if you can imagine, this is a time where kingdoms are being raised up and they're being struck down. And the writer here of Hebrews says that we have received a kingdom that cannot be shaken. It can't be it can't be destroyed. It can't be touched by swords or by military power. This is a kingdom that has great power and that extends even beyond this very world. It is beyond what we see with our eyes. So a huge point for this lesson because it kind of seems kind of basic, where you're trying to get the students to respond, hey, we see God in a great way. Now our response is to worship him. You want to move beyond the short answers, because you might ask a question, what should our response be to this truth that God is good? And they're going to say, we should be thankful, which is good. You want them to answer, but you might want to just dig a little bit deeper. So you might want to ask a lot more personal questions and just saying, hey, what is one way that you have seen God move in your life this past week? What is one way that you have seen God move in your life this past year or last year? And so one way to kind of move beyond those short answers is just to dig a little bit deeper and ask more specific questions. And again, that may depend on your group, but that's just a tip for you. So to wrap up the lesson here, you again just want to drive home that we know that God is the creator of the world, and also that God is the redeemer of the world through his son, Jesus Christ. And because God has done those two great things for us, he created us and redeemed us. Now, our response as those who have believed and trust in his son is to worship him, and is to give him all praise and to give him all glory. So the lesson ends with kind of an application for the students in page 12. There is a place for them to jot down 20 ways to worship God with reverence and awe. There's already 5 that is listed for them. So as a leader, you just want to encourage them to list as many as they can. The point isn't to get all 20 down, but to really list down things that they will do and things that they are planning to do as a way of responding and worshiping God with awe and with reverence. Well, we thank you for watching this video. We look forward to meeting you in the other videos in Chi Alpha Weekend. God bless. Bye.